Good morning.
Hello.
I'm ED-SKaR.
I'm Paul Allen.
And we are once again back in an actually sunny Milton Keynes, hence the terrible lighting around, to play Bolt Action at the War Games workshop in Milton Keynes at an event run by the Outriders MK. And today we are playing Tank War. And so we are using the Armoured Platoon selector from the Tank War rulebook, and we've both accidentally ended up playing as the Germans.
Yes.
So what did you bring?
I just bought 3 tigers and a little motorbike.
It's not a particularly efficient list. It's 4 order dice in 1,250 points. I, of course, have done something very similar. Not quite the same thing. I've brought a mouse, because of course I have. I've got then a Hetzer and Panzer III as my 3 vehicles. Then I have a little infantry squad on a 251, and I've got a Goliath mine on a Kettenkrad. I think I also have a motorcycle machine gun. I think I do. We'll have to check. But that means I've got, what, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8 order dice. So I've got twice what you have. And I've got a mouse, which is 600 points. It's half the list by itself.
Variant of the mouse you're playing?
I'm playing the production version, so it's the one with Gotterdammerung, the limited fuel. Which is going to be a problem, I'm sure, because that's got a 1 in 3 chance of it running out of fuel every time it moves.
I mean, depends how tightly packed the table is. It's not going to get much movement anyway.
Yeah.
It's huge.
You always get 1 move, so I do get to move out of the deployment zone at least, so I can get into a useful position, maybe, hopefully. I apologise for the lighting.
So the lighting looks like it's
The lighting is absolutely terrible.
It's trying to auto adjust to
Yeah,
go dark.
it auto adjusts, but because we're using the face cam, the face cam doesn't have a lock for the exposure, so it will just randomly change exposure constantly. I really hate it. It's annoying. I can't fix it in post. It's baked into the video.
Just adjust the contrast and then just hit it back again.
Just constantly adjust the
Like everyone's sick.
Yeah, I don't like the idea of that.
Anyway,
we need to go
proceed on
inside. We need to go inside and help set up the tables, and then we will have a look at the games that we're going to play.
Yeah.
All right.
Report back.
Yeah. So our first game, suspiciously, was against each other. There seems to be a running trend that we always get paired up at some point whenever Paul comes down to the tournament. We will be deploying in first wave. This means we're going to drive onto the board edge in the first turn, and specifically from the short board edge to give us the opportunity to fight at longer range than we usually do. I tried to give myself a gun line to cover all of the angles down the board, and did manage to get a shot off with my mouse in the very first turn.
Which took out one of my tigers, ruining my intended aggressive deployment. My Hollywood tiger took the middle easily and shrugged off the Goliath mine attack, and basically sat there dominating the area for the rest of the game. I had wanted to take the middle and then protect my flanks with the 2 tigers, but I had to reroute my command tiger to take objective 3 and hold back the mouse. This was working quite well since neither the command tiger or the mouse could hit a barn door. So I was quite confident until Ed deployed his infantry onto the objective with his Hanamag. As we reached the end of turn 6, we rolled to see if we would play on, which we didn't. So the game concluded with me holding 1 objective and Ed holding 2 objectives, with the additional 2 being contested.
No matter how big the guns of the Tigers were, and no matter how much I surrounded them and pummeled them from all angles, there was only 1 model destroyed in this entire game, just that first Tiger in turn 1. Embarrassing gunnery skills.
Game 2 and the objective was to advance onto the centre of the board. As the large compound on our board forced me to have to move around, slowing progress, allowing my opponent to position his artillery with a straight line of sight down the middle of the compound. This ended up pinning and immobilising my Hollywood Tiger, which was pretty devastating. The dark grey Tiger was destroyed almost straight away by the opponent's tank destroyer, which was able to move into a line of sight I'd failed to notice because it was hiding behind some bushes. I decided to go on the offensive with my remaining Tiger as my bike was still holding the rear objective. This ended badly, leaving my bike to bravely run away from the infantry unit, repeatedly until it was killed.
My second game is against one of my regular favourite opponents, because we seem to be quite well matched in terms of skill, and our games are always pretty tense and hard fought. Today is no different. What that means is that our game will come down to our lists, of which mine is quite bad, and the mission, which doesn't suit me all that well at all. But I did get to choose the table end, and I have all of this open ground to shoot from, which should be good. And as I started bringing on my models during the first wave rules, the very first die roll of the game is my mouse running out of fuel. Good job, amazing, wonderful. Thankfully, I managed to get it up on this hill, and my opponent agreed that it had pretty good lines of fire from an elevated position, so even though it can't move anymore, well, it's just a big armoured pillbox now. My opponent slinked through the village at their end of the board, getting in position to take the first and middle objectives from their end fairly early on. But I also was able to get to the middle with some degree of firepower, so how big that fight becomes is the important bit. The Goliath shot up and actually hit an enemy vehicle. Amazing! Didn't hurt it in the slightest, but it hit. It hit. On the right, I risked my Panzer III, as the only way I could hurt the JS2 is in the side armour. I didn't get to the side armour, but I gave it a good shot. The Soviets had pretty solidly taken the village, and I was stuck essentially shelling it from long range. All of the machine guns in my list were targeting this tank descent squad, who were just getting a bit too close. The JS raced over the wreck of the Panzer III to offend the mouse, and the two exchanged an embarrassingly large number of shots before realising the end of the game was coming up and they should fight for the objectives rather than fighting each other. In the dying seconds of the game, my Hetzer nearly managed to knock the enemy squad off of the middle objective, which would have been a lot of points, but it was held by my opponent in the end. My opponent even managed to get a squad onto my objective at my end of the board, but the mouse, switching from targeting the JS, blew them all up, so at least they didn't score any points there. All told, the killed units were very similar, but my opponent had the favour of objectives with that middle one, and so only a very close defeat.
This game was a play on the classic escape the board edge. However, in this scenario, we needed to exit turn 5 or 7 only due to airstrikes, which was annoying. Turn 1, I decided to go aggressive with the intention of taking the middle and waiting until turn 4 before making my dash with my bike and 2 of the Tigers to the board edge, leaving 1 behind to hold the middle. Then the Tiger on my right flank was taken out by a bazooka after successfully forcing the Hellcat to retreat twice, which was very amusing. The centre of play, my command tank made it to the middle, but then was sort of bogged down, getting shot from 2 different directions. I did manage, however, to take out a Sherman, which was quite good. My Hollywood Tiger was able to destroy an M10 using the destroyed Sherman as cover and began to manoeuvre to make a run for the board edge. However, my opponent obviously saw what I was doing and put his Wolverine in ambush, which put me in a difficult situation, so I decided I was just going to make a run for it. However, it didn't really end favourably for me, as you can see by his dice rolls. At which point my opponent took his Jeep and made a rush for the board edge, which at the end of the game tilted the victory in his favour due to the kills being 2-2.
My last game was against another favoured opponent, the player that brings very, very silly lists. Although this time, their list is actually quite sensible, except for the command vehicle being a Tachanka, that being a horse-drawn wagon with a Maxim machine gun. Just what you want in tank war. So in this game we get to have a fight between the biggest and the smallest vehicles in the game, or nearly, and we got to have that fight immediately straight away because the Tachanka used the extra movement on the road to beans it all the way down to my end of the board. Well, you can guess who won that fight. My Kettenkrad brought the Goliath mine to within range of a T-34 and it missed, leaving everyone else pretty vulnerable on my left flank. Even with support for the Panzer III trying to cover them so that they could extract, it wasn't enough, and then the Panzer III went down as well. In the middle, the Soviet Free Rifle Squad got their anti-tank grenades to bear on the mouse, and this is absolutely able to destroy this vehicle. Thankfully it didn't, but it was pretty hairy for a moment there. In fact, my mouse had pretty much free rein to do whatever it wanted. Its heavy armour held against absolutely everything, even once surrounded by 5 enemy tanks. By the end of this game, kind of the last few turns, was the mouse getting just barrage after barrage from every single vehicle, stacking up the pins, but even then it ultimately survived. Unfortunately, the objective was to get units off of the opponent's board edge, and I didn't manage to get anything even close, and my opponent managed to get this truck with 3 units off the board, and so a great victory for them. Given the silly lists of this player, I usually table them in the first half of a typical game between us, but this time they got a well-deserved win. Congratulations.
Right then, so how did we do?
Terribly.
Yeah, I came 3rd from last. Very low down the list, and you came last. Yes. So for me, my mouse wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it still certainly didn't pull its weight. I think over the course of the whole, of all 3 games, it probably did deliver on 600 points, but it cost 600 points per game, not per day.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not earned itself back. The rest of my list, some stuff was good, some stuff wasn't good. The Goliath, I like it because it's a fun thing to use, but it's terrible. Yeah, if I was playing more seriously, if I was actually trying to win, I'd be going for a very different list. But I wanted to use the mouse because it's fun, and that's more important than winning. Particularly as I got to fight the biggest vehicle in the game, the mouse, versus the smallest vehicle in the game, the Tachanka. And unsurprisingly, I won that fight. How about you?
Yeah, so the Tigers were very powerful, as I anticipated. The problem was numbers. The last game, if I'd had more numbers, it would have been fine.
It's just a standard thing in bolt action that heavy tanks are inefficient, and whilst in tank war you can push it and take a heavy tank so long as you're efficient with the rest of the list. One big heavy tank can help you out, but the mouse certainly isn't that. It's too far, and then having 3 Tigers that you did is the same kind of thing. It's too many points and too few baskets.
It's probably better to think of it as a normal game of bolt action, but you're not limited to only taking one vehicle. Instead of thinking of it as it's a tank, but the name implies that it's just tanks, but removing the restriction of only having one tank, I think, is more of a logical way to think about playing it.
Yeah, I think my favourite way of thinking about it, because I've heard someone describe it this way, is that rather than calling it tank war, you call it bolt action with an armoured platoon. Because that's just armoured platoon rather than a reinforced platoon, and that is a much better way of thinking about it, and you probably end up with a much more efficient list in terms of actually being competitive and being able to play. But it's fun to be silly sometimes, and coming to a 1250 point game with 4 order dice and the biggest tank in the game, that's just fun.
And I got a Brad Pitt model.
Oh yes. In the prizes, even though we were right at the bottom, we did win a few little things. So Paul has won the Inglorious Special Edition model, which we think is Brad Pitt, or something similar.
Someone pulling a knife. So
Someone pulling a knife.
Work that out.
And I got a German howitzer with the winter uniforms. So that'll be something I'll build on the channel at some point, probably, because everything I do gets put on the channel eventually. So, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off and go home and have food?
We're all good. Let's go and have a curry.
Thank you very much for everyone for watching. Thanks for Paul for giving me the lift. And I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and I'll see you next time.